my head to the heavens, calculating my steps. Deliver prayers to my people, enemies can't intercept. I'm ready for what's in front of me and prepared for what's next. I got my mind made up, never settle for less. I know that life ain't easy, nothing worth having is. City so full of danger, don't know what a hero is. I will never forget that I made it through disaster. Life, peace, and joy is the only thing I'm after. My soul can feel the hunger. I'm waiting for the change. My world was blown asunder. Can't seem to break the chain. It's gonna take my all to get by. Trying to survive. Hands I lift high. Tears in my eyes. Don't need a crown. I need a dream. I need a heart of a king. Yeah, got the future on the string. I ain't never gonna stop. This right here the only dream I know. Hear the passion when I sing. I ain't following the flock. This is the start of my regime. I know that I just wanna live. City so full of danger, don't know what a hero is. I will never forget that I made it through disaster. Life, peace, and joy is the only thing I'm after. My soul can feel the hunger. I'm waiting for the change. My world was blown asunder. Can't seem to break the chain. It's gonna take my all to get by. Trying to survive. Hands I lift high. Tears in my eyes. Don't need a crown. I need a dream. I need a heart of a king. I need a heart of a king. I need a heart. It's gonna take my all to get by. Trying to survive. Hands I lift high. Tears in my eyes. Don't need a crown. I need a dream. I need a heart of a king. My soul can feel the hunger. I'm waiting for the change. My world was blown asunder. Can't seem to break the chain. It's gonna take my all to get by. Trying to survive. Hands I lift high. Tears in my eyes. Don't need a crown. I need a dream. I need a heart of a king. Yeah, got the future on the string. I ain't never gonna stop. This right here the only dream I know. Hear the passion when I sing. I ain't following the flock. This is the start of my regime. I know. I need a heart of a king. I need a heart of a king.
Jesus, and all I know is that there's something about Jesus. So every day I'll be praying out to Jesus because I love you.
Can I tell you about Jesus? The
one who died for our sins, that Jesus. All I know is that there's something about Jesus. So every day I'll be praying out the Jesus because I love the Lord. Yo, what's going on, Anthony? How you doing, brother?
What's going on, man? It's been a while.
I know, man. I know it's been a hot minute. I had a lot going on. Officially retired from the Air Force. As you can see, my guys got me the new Air Force shadow box in the background, which is sweet. Well, not officially
Congrats.
retired. Not officially. I did my retirement ceremony. 1 March will be the retirement date. So I'm
Okay,
super excited. And I think today's topic is right on point, in honor of me finishing 20 plus years of military service.
man.
Um, so I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
people can guess where my
got an
stance is
uncle
at.
that just retired over the summer. He actually just retired June. Was it June 20th? He retired.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know he happy. What is
Oh
he
yeah.
doing now? Is he working or he just enjoying
He's
retirement?
been working for a while because he was in the reserves for a while. He had, went off of active duty, I guess, went into the reserves. And so finally he's fully retired. No more PT. That's what he told me. He said, no more PT.
Man, I already gained about 10 pounds from not doing PT. It's a real thing, but as soon as you don't have to take that PT test, it's just like a huge weight off your shoulder. It really is.
That's what he said too.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited about not having to do P. Well, I still work out and stuff, but I like to work out my way, not the
Right.
way somebody want me to work out. I want to do what I want to do when it comes to working out. But yeah, nah, that's good, man. What you been up to?
Man, working hard, man. There's a lot going on. Um, just celebrated our anniversary in November.
Okay, okay.
15 years. Yeah, man,
Congrats.
15 years of doing this ministry thing. Just got finished the final edits and everything on my new book. If it's God's will, it's God's bill. So we'll be putting that out probably right after the first of the year. After I get back from the holidays, I'll start, setting up, book signings and get that thing going. And then, preaching the word, discipling, and man, I've been on stream after stream. You've been checking out some of the streams, man. We done had some good stuff going on with Kingdom on the Road. My man Joe Day, his partner Andrew, TC, my man TC joined us. We have this new show on the Rip, off the Rip. Let it rip, man. That bad boy we just go. So
Yeah.
that's been a lot of fun, man. But a lot of evangelism, a lot of outreach, man. Me and a couple of partners, Pastor James West. Shout out to him if he's watching or if he watches this later. Man, outreach machine. I
Oh
mean,
wow.
we were hitting the streets, ministering to people. We finished off the summer with the summer ending barbecue. We fed hundreds of people, man. That was amazing. And we just fed 72 families for Thanksgiving. We went out door to door and fed 72 families for Thanksgiving. So man, we've been hitting it pretty hard, as well as doing the stream thing.
Yeah, no,
What's up?
praise
What's up,
God, man.
CJ?
Praise God. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
You know what I've been doing, moving. As y'all can see, I'm in a different spot. We've been moving. I've been retiring, and I'm trying to learn a new job. So it's just been crazy. So I had to take a little break from this. But come January, we're gonna wrap it up. Not only Blessedtimony channel gonna have more going off. Me and Anthony thinking about doing another channel called Reddit. We haven't even decided what we're gonna call it yet. But it's
Right.
like Reddit reviews, Reddit replies. Basically, we're gonna look at questions on Reddit, and then we're gonna just reply to them and react to them. And most of them may be Christian questions, but it may just be regular questions as well. But that's something we're gonna try to do new in 2024. Speaking of that, though, that leads us to our question of the week today, which actually came from Reddit. So I'm just kind of prepping myself to get ready for that. I'll pull it up. And so basically, can I be Christian in the military? The dude says, he says, I want to be a Royal Marine, but could this go against my religion? If we went to war with another country and I was sent somewhere and had to do what soldiers do, would I be going against my religion? And later on, we'll
Man.
kind of go through some of the other questions that people said, or comments that people replied. But the Royal Marines, that's like UK's version of special ops.
So
Yeah.
if he become a Royal Marine, he gonna really do what soldiers do. And so that's the
You
question.
really do.
Yeah, he really is. And so that's the question of the week. And so we want to hear y'all thoughts on it. Let us know in the comments. Do you feel like a Christian? Can you be a Christian and serve in the military? Can you be a Christian and take up arms? What about police officers? Um, and if you got to use of force to the point of death, point of killing somebody, does that go against the Christian religion? Before we get into that, I'm gonna pull up the devotional. The devotional is tied right to it. Brenda says absolutely. So okay, we definitely
All right, we're gonna
yeah
get in on it.
yeah
All right.
we're gonna get into it because there's some Christians some denominations that believe you cannot be a Christian and serve in the military, take up arms. Um, what's going on, Sean? Thank you for checking in. All right, y'all.
What's
So
up, brother?
let's get to this devotional.
All right.
Y'all leave y'all answers in the comments of what y'all think. We'll interact with them and we'll have a conversation about it. Let's do it. All right, picture this. A Christian, follower of Christ, serving and fighting, taking up arms, doing what the military pay people to do, serving and fighting in the military. Some say it's an oxymoron. Yet here I stand, a believer in Jesus Christ who proudly served 20 years in the United States Air Force. Now, people have their many different reasons of why they doubt whether or not a Christian should or should not serve in the military. But I want to unravel 3 common misconceptions and cover what the Bible truly says about this. All right, so the first common reason that some may say that Christians should not serve in the military is because they say Christians should always turn the other cheek. And while it's true Jesus taught us to love our enemies, it's essential to understand that defending the innocent and preserving justice does not contradict Jesus' teachings. Matter of fact, in Ecclesiastes, I think chapter 3, it reminds us that there's a time for war and there's a time for peace. And if you don't step in to stop evil, that could make you complicit. That's something to think about. A second reason why people say that Christians can't serve in the military is because of the commandment, thou shalt not kill. Now, the King James Version used thou shalt not kill, but a more accurate translation, and almost every other translation says, thou shalt not murder. You see, God, through his word, through the Bible, distinguishes between justifiable killing, as seen in self-defense or doing a just war, and an act of murder. They're two different things. And in the book of Genesis, matter of fact, chapter 9, it says that if anyone takes a human life, that person's life will also be taken by humans' hands. That's what we call justice. That's not called murder. That's a difference, right? That is justice, and God has allowed us to have certain government authorities that are allowed to do justice, and sometimes that justice means to put somebody to death. This leads me to the book of Romans. In Romans 13, the Apostle Paul acknowledges the role of authorities in maintaining order, and he also stated that all authorities come from God, and those positions of authority have been put in place by God. So have you ever thought about the fact that the government authorities that are sending people to war were actually established and put in place by God? That's a question that's worth pondering. A third common reason why people believe that Christians should not serve in the military is because we're called to follow Jesus and be like Jesus. And in Isaiah 9, we see that Jesus is titled the Prince of Peace, right? So while Jesus is the Prince of Peace, Jesus himself also acknowledged earthly authority. In Matthew 22, verse 21, he says, give back to Caesar's what is Caesar's. This recognition underscores the idea that earthly authorities serve a purpose established by God. However, even though Jesus is identified as the Prince of Peace in Isaiah, Revelation portrays Jesus as a warrior. Revelation 19 portrays him as a warrior, bringing justice and judgment. It's a side of Jesus that we sometimes forget about. In his first coming, Jesus came as the Prince of Peace to bring salvation and reconcile humanity to God. This is aligned with Isaiah's prophecy. This is the reason why a lot of the Israelites didn't believe he was the Messiah, because they were looking for him to be like he was in Revelation 19. So in Revelation 19, I believe verses 11 through 16 or so, we see Jesus portrayed in his second coming, fulfilling a different aspect of his role. Here he is depicted as a warrior bringing judgment and justice, just like those people who kill somebody by humans' hands, they will be killed. Right? So this representation emphasizes the sovereignty and authority of Jesus over all of his creation, right? So he is the Prince of Peace who offers salvation, and he's also the conquering king who will bring final judgment. Now, as I get ready to land this plane, I want to caution those who say a Christian servant in the military or as a police officer is sinning, because that person may be doing what God himself called them to do. Take Gideon, for example. And if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn to Judges chapter 6. We're going to go through verses 11 through 16. It says the following. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat beneath the great tree of Ophrah, which belonged to Joash of the clan of Bezer. Gideon's son of Joash was threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress to hide the grain from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." "Sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt, but now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to Midianites?" Man, I love this passage because it shows the real side of Gideon, right? And a lot of us can relate to that. A lot of us may feel like in hard times, like, where is God? And you tell me that there's a God, but look what I'm dealing with and look what I'm going through, right? Well, anyhow, let's keep going. Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you." "But Lord," Gideon replied, "how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the whole tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family." It's funny how God uses the least, right? The Lord said to him, "I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man." So, as we can see, Gideon, much like a lot of us, right? Much like those people who question whether or not Christians can serve in the military today. We're wondering, where's God in our troubles, right? He's questioning his own capacities, being from the weakest clan. He also sought out reassurance and a sign that he was indeed following God's will. But despite his doubts, Gideon chose to trust and obey God. This reminds us that when discerning a significant decision like whether or not we should serve in the military, seeking God's guidance is crucial. Gideon's example teaches us to question, seek confirmation, and ultimately rely on God's direction. So the decision to serve in the military is a deeply personal decision, right? I can't tell you what to do. You should be guided by the Holy Spirit. We're not all called to the same path, but it's essential to not falsely condemn those who choose to serve. As we see in Romans 13, verses 1-4, it states, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Let us be discerning, prayerful, and respectful of each other's journey as we navigate to call to serve God in our various capacities." All right, okay, that was a lot. So let's go ahead and break it down and dissect it. The comments are coming in. We're going to get to your comments as well, but I definitely want to hear Anthony's thoughts before we get to the comments.
Yeah, I think, for me, I do agree that there's a difference between killing and murder. I think the Bible does make that a clear distinction. I feel like people have mishandled turn the other cheek. When it talks about turn the other cheek, this is a colloquialism that was uh, basically in Israel, to any type of insult was a slap, you know. And so if you were slapped, you were not to bring insult for insult. And so a lot of times, we view that literally as someone actually slapping you and that you're not allowed to defend yourself. And I don't believe that that's the heartbeat behind it. I believe the heartbeat behind it is not rendering evil for evil, not doing to others that something that you wouldn't want done to you, but not being able to defend yourself. Because there's a verse, and we may get to it later on, but I'll just throw it out here real briefly, and we can discuss it more later. There's a verse where Jesus tells them to sell their tunic and get a knife, get a sword. And like, what does that even mean, right? But obviously he wasn't against, them defending themselves or using force, but he was against it being done, I believe, out of the wrong motive and the wrong heart, and that it should be done within the confines of the will of God, and whatever that means. And that context, I think, is very narrow. You wouldn't be just, anybody just pick up a gun and just start, doing this or doing that. And I think I struggle with, those Christians that if you're not, promoting, being able to carry a gun, if you're not promoting self-defense, then you're not being a Christian. I think that falls into this category of, are we going too far either way with these things? And so my initial reaction is that I don't see any problem with the Christian serving in the military. And here's my caveat to that their goal and their desire is to protect, not to kill, right? If I go into the military with the thought that I get to kill people, right? I get to
That's a
have a
hard part,
gun.
though.
I get to
Yeah.
do harm, and I say that from, the example of, I remember being security at a nightclub, and being security at a nightclub, there was times where I had coworkers come in and they couldn't wait for somebody to act up so that they could slam somebody, so they can
Yeah.
hurt somebody. And I'm going into the job saying, you know what? I want this to be a peaceful night. I want to have a good time, but I can handle myself, and I'm not afraid to put in the work if need be. If I need to do what I need to do, I'm going to do that, but I'm not going in with the attitude, try me. I can't wait. I wish somebody would tonight, and I think that is something that individuals, we can't see on the surface. So we don't know how people are going into, signing up for the military. Are they seeing it as an opportunity? I get to use a gun. I get to hurt people. I get to, kill those people over there, or, that kind of stuff, rather than I'm doing this to protect the liberties and the freedoms of my family and my friends and my fellow countrymen.
Yeah, not well. You bring up a couple good points too. One, being a cop in the Air Force, they taught us use of force, right? And so use of force tell you that you use the lowest amount of force to stop the threat.
Right.
So that should be the mentality you should have, right? You should have the mentality, and I feel, I believe that's kind of what Jesus was getting at too. Is like, especially as Christians, we shouldn't automatically be like, well, if he hit me, let me hit him back. We shouldn't avenge him, and we should try to make peace. We should try to reconcile. We should show love to that person, right? Now, if you got to defend yourself, you have to defend yourself, and I don't think that Jesus was recommending that we just allow somebody to harm us to the point where it may kill us or whatever the case may be. But our heart posture shouldn't be, let me hurry up and get revenge, right?
Right.
The other thing is, sadly, there are some people who feel that way. Me and one of my buddies who I served with, we were on the way to Iraq, and we were stopped at some hotel. We were in transit to Iraq, and we were playing cards. And while we was playing cards, he was just talking about how he can't wait to get over there and kill all of them over there and all this other kind of crazy stuff. And like, he's a Caucasian guy. And so me being a black guy, I'm like, I feel like if this was like slavery time, you'll say the same thing. Like,
Right,
all those
about
people are
me.
not about me. Yeah, all those people are not the same. And all this, like, how can you have that mentality that you want to go over there? I have zero tolerance for people who are like prejudiced that way, or who will say, well, all cops are bad, or all black people are this way, or all white people are that way, or I can't wait to get over there and kill all of them. That is a horrible heart posture to have, and that I have. At the time I had a pretty short fuse for that. So me and him kind of got into it, but yeah, I agree with you on the whole point of, as Christians though, sometimes our reaction, especially when it comes to like personal matters, or a brother or an enemy harming us, it should kind of be so radical and different that people see God in that. Hey, he could have acted this way. He could have talked bad about this person. He could have did X, Y, and Z, but instead he showed love and kindness. And I think that's the posture that Jesus will have us to have. Now, when it comes to serving your country or doing a job, and even if you're not doing it to serve your country, like me, when I joined because I was having a baby and I need to take care of my family. That was my motive for joining, but that wasn't the reason. But that wasn't the only reason why I stayed or why I did a good job. I had a pretty good career, and so when I believe that if you, as a Christian, sign up and say you're gonna do something, and be, I think Colossians talk about this. Colossians 3:23. Whatever we do, we need to do it as if we're doing it for God. So if I sign up and say that I'm gonna serve, I need to be a good soldier and serve well. And so there's a couple passages that bring it up, but I want to get to some of these comments. And then we'll look at some of the comments that the people said on Reddit. And then I have 2 videos that I think kind of hone in on this pretty well. So let's see what people said. All right, so Carl says, you can, if they don't require you to go against the word in any way. If they require you to take an oath, if they require you to take the lives of others, if it requires you to idolize the country or flag over his word, and etc. All right, so What's your response to that? I kind of I agree with some points and I disagree with some points. Oh snaps! Joseph is on. Joe, what's going on, brother?
There he is. What's up, brother?
Me and Anthony was saying we was wondering if you were gonna get on because I think this conversation is gonna lead into the following your government and authorities, and I know we said we kind of want to talk about that. So if you're free to get on and come on, I'll do the little magic and stuff to bring you on screen. But if you want to just chat in the comments, you know that'll work as well. But I know that you said you think we may have a different view on following the government authority. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this conversation tonight. So just let me know, man. All right. So getting back to Carl's point. So Carl said you can if it doesn't require you to go against the word in any way. I'll say for me, for that piece, I do agree that we are called. Like when Jesus said, "Give to Caesar what's Caesar, and give to God what's God." That's a twofold. So
Right.
we give to the government, and we do what our government say. But at the end of the day, our ultimate master, our ultimate authority is God. So just like in Daniel when he was captive, he rose to like second command. You don't do that if you're not being a good whatever. You know, in his case, he was a slave, he was a servant, but he rose to second in command. But then when they made that decree that he couldn't pray to God, that's where he drew the line. And so
Right.
when you get to a point where and this is not just for military service, this goes for like the husband who's the head of the house. If the husband is telling his wife to do something that goes against something that God says do, then the wife should not do that because ultimately God is the head, right? And in the military we call that an unlawful order. So the Uniform Code of Military Justice has something in place where if your leaders tell you to do something that's unlawful, by law you're supposed to not do it. And so as Christians, if our leaders are telling us to do something that go against God, then we shouldn't do it. And so I agree with that part. Now some of the other things, like what's your thought on that? Take an oath, Anthony. Do
Yeah.
you know the passage where it talks about not taking an oath? Your yes should be a yes and your no should be a no.
There's multiple passages about oath taking. I think the most important thing that we have to take into consideration with an oath is that number one, we don't want our mouth to cause our flesh to sin, right? We don't want to take an oath that puts us in a position where we are required to go against the word of God. And I think that's where that comes in because, if I take an oath, uh, for some people, and I would love to hear what his CJ's thoughts are on marriage vows, because marriage vows would be considered an oath, right?
Yeah.
That I'm vowing to honor and love and cherish. This is an oath, and so if that oath contradicts what the word of God teaches, what the will of God is, then that oath then becomes a problem. But if I'm vowing or I'm making an oath to uphold uh, the values and the will of God, then that's different. And so I do think that's an interesting statement because you go into let's look at like frats, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. What if you're required to, take some type of oath in there or make some kind of declaration of, of loyalty and things like that? So I do think that's something that has to be thought out and actually has to be examined. I'm not saying that you should never do it, but I think you should pay attention to what it is that you're making an oath. A police officer makes an oath to protect and serve, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? And so I don't think flat out, straight across the board, never take an oath, but I think it should be examined. I think we go back up to his first statement. Does it go against the word of God? Am I vowing to do something that is going to put me in direct contradiction with my faith and what I believe? I think that was the question that the guy asked about joining What was it? What was the group he was joining? The Marines or uh,
The Royal Marines, yeah.
the Royal Marines? That's the question he's asking, right? Is this going to put me in a position where I compromise or contradict my faith? And I think that has to be thought of. Yeah, yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
I want to join the Royal Marines, but could this go against my religion if I were putting, yeah, would this be going against, basically going against what I believe? So I think vows and oaths, are the same thing. Are we looking at them and saying, does this go against what I believe? You know?
Yeah. No, that's a good point because the military, they do require you to take an oath of enlistment, or your oath of commission when you re-enlist or when you re-up, you take an oath. And so, but I do like the point of, like you said, what about marriage vows?
Yeah.
Because that's an oath, so
That's an oath.
so that's something you got to think of. Keith brings up a good point. Let's see. Keith says the military requires you to worship false idols as part of their indoctrination, but as a Christian, you laugh that off as foolish and perform your duties with the Christian posture. I want to know more
What you mean by that?
yeah, because I do know this. I know about the Marines. They call themselves like devil dogs, and they got the little
Yeah.
devil dog thing and all that. And so I never was really a big fan of Marines calling themselves devil dogs, which is why I'm glad I wasn't a Marine. But I don't know that the Air Force kind of had me worshiping idols or required me to worship idols. Matter of fact, the Air Force, I think, if anything, if anything, they were more on a coexist kind of
Mm,
mindset.
okay.
So
Yeah.
it was and this may be controversial, and I want to hear what other people got to say about this too. But I believe that that's okay, and here's why: God Himself gives us the choice. God doesn't force us to be Christians. He allows us to make choices. And God, He chose grace on those who belong to Him and who don't belong to Him. And so when you're a military over a whole country, especially a country that you claim that we're free to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, then you have to allow people who don't think like you to or believe like you to serve as well. So if anything, the Air Force will say, hey, it's fine that you're a Christian and you can be a Christian, but but don't discriminate or mistreat the Muslim who you serve with, or don't mistreat the other person that you serve with.
So I got a question. So did Keith, did you serve? Do you
Yeah,
know
Keith, he
if he
served in the
served?
Army. Matter of
Okay,
fact, he
okay,
said, I don't know what they do in the Air Force, but I had my hand on the King James Bible when I was sworn in the Army.
okay.
And
Yeah.
then he says the Army wants you to put your unit, your service, and Army above all. To put the Army before God is idolatry. Okay, so I see what he's saying now. So yeah, now the Air Force do have our we have a core value that's called service before self. But every person I serve in the Air Force, when they say service before self, they don't mean the Air Force before everything else. What they mean is handle your stuff so you can serve. Take care of your family members. Be healthy physically, mentally, so then that way you're able to perform your service. But also too, before your selfish acts. So like I may want to go party all night long at the club, but I know I got to be up at 4 a.m. to guard an aircraft. Service before self says it's the same thing that Jesus teaches. It teaches us to put others before our self ways, and so that's how the Air Force look at it. But yeah, I will say the Army is a different breed. I've worked with the Army. I've been under Army units, and they are a little different when it comes to that kind of stuff. But what was you gonna say about Keith serving, Anthony?
Yeah, I just was going to ask, did he serve? Because he seems that, have a lot of kind of knowledge about, inner workings and everything. So I'm glad he's on here to kind of, you know, be in the comments and talk about it. So,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but he served. Um, okay, let's see. So, but yeah, and then it gets hold on, wait. What did he say? Another thing he said was if they require you to take lives of others. So the harsh reality, the military, they take lives. You know, trying to think how I want to explain this. Serving for 20
Yeah.
years. So one, our politicians, the goal. So war is just basically essentially a tool that politics use. So before we get to war, they do try to negotiate. They do try to, they have embassies and all that kind of stuff to try to negotiate and talk certain things out. And even once you get to war, they still try to do that. But once they get to a certain point, they go to war. And if they go to war and you serve, they pay you in most cases to kill, right? Depending on your job. And even if you don't have a particular job to kill, you're probably doing a mission that supports the people who go and have to kill, right? And so that I think is where this question is coming from. Can a Christian support a mission? So, for example, if my job is to load bombs on the aircraft, I don't actually shoot them, but that bomb is gonna shoot somebody eventually, right? Or if I'm the pilot who has to do it, or does that go against it? And I personally don't believe that it does, because if you look at the Old Testament, there's multiple wars that God Himself had the Israelites go out and do. Gideon is an example. The angel came and called him a mighty hero. I mean, look at King David. They wrote songs about all the people he killed.
Right.
Oh boy got mad about it. So to me, this is where I think, and then one of the videos I'm gonna show, the dude, I think he kind of hit the nail on the head. He's like, a lot of times we answer this stuff out of emotions and not out of what the Word of God say. Because if you're saying that it's wrong to kill, then it kind of makes it look like, well, God was sinning or Jesus was sinning, right? When He instructed people to go sin, like in Genesis chapter 9, it literally says, let me see. Matter of fact, let me see if I can pull that up. I'm gonna try to find it.
Joe Day said he's ready when you want to send the link.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you send him the link? Do you have a link? Do you have the
Ye-
link to call in?
Yep, I could do it. Let me see. Yep.
And then I'm gonna try to see if I can set this up. But I want to try to find this
Mm-hmm.
this passage in Genesis chapter 9 real quick. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it says Genesis 9:6. Matter of fact, I start at 5. And I will require the blood of anyone who takes another person's life. If a wild animal kills a person, it must die. And anyone who murders a fellow human must die. If anyone takes a human life, that's a person's life will also be taken by human hands. Right there in Genesis, God set it up to where government, people, if somebody commits a murder, then they're gonna be killed. They're gonna be put to death by human hands. And so I think they're, like Ecclesiastic said, there's a time and a place, for you to kill. For you to
Yeah,
go to war.
I think the hard part about killing is that for your average person, right? That seems like something that has been drilled into us as wrong, as negative, as never ever, right? Do it, right? Never ever, that there's no reason to do it, and then as a Christian, now that's compounded because, and I hope the guy jumps on. He just sent me a message about, the early Christians being quote unquote, because it doesn't actually say that, but the early Christians, even outside of the Bible in the early Christian days, were pacifists, that they were, not about nationalism or serving country. They were actually contradictory to that and that mindset. And so when you think about killing for a country or killing for a cause, most people have in their mind that as a Christian, that's automatically just not something that you do. Period. And so I think it's one of those things that, because it's drilled into you. Think about it this way: it's drilled into us just being aggressive is wrong in some cases, right? If I raise my voice, people are like, "Oh no, that's wrong. That's wrong." So to reach to the level of actually taking a life for whatever reason, whether self-defense, whether by accident, whether in the line of duty, right? Um, these things for the average person who's not in that situation, who's not in those environments, they automatically think, "Oh, that's got to be wrong." And so I think there's a inherent bias, right? Automatically, when you think about um, military, like you said, police, and you did both. You were military police, right?
Yeah.
So anybody who's put in a position where they would have to do something. I never, served in any of those capacities. The closest I ever got was, doing security and having to put somebody in a headlock and put my knee in their back, put them down on the ground, like, hey, you gonna calm down or you going out, that kind of thing. And so it's like that is taboo, right? There's certain subjects that are just, no, we don't talk about that. And so I think that's what makes a conversation like this get emotional, like you were saying, that people will rise to the level of emotions and say, you know what, that's just wrong. If they had any bad, what do you call it, any bad situations where maybe someone they know died through police, brutality or anything like that, it colors their entire view, right?
Yeah.
Of anybody in a uniform, even if
Yeah.
it is a military uniform. And then
Yeah.
I was just watching Boys in the Hood, the famous quote from Furious Styles, the military ain't no place for a black man.
Yeah.
And stuff like that gets imprinted right in your subconscious and in your mind. And people will be saying that without ever even knowing anything about it. That's the thing that's in their head, right?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. I mean, I think Hollywood does a really good job of painting a picture of what the military is like, and it's not like that. So one, the military, some people get it if they've been around military, but the military, every job that you have on the outside is a similar job in the military. So I could be a cook. I could be like, I don't necessarily have to, I could be a doctor. Matter of fact, I can be
A doctor,
a
right?
chaplain in the
A chaplain.
military. The military has military preachers and chaplains, right? And so to say a Christian can't serve in the military when that military recognizes the our worship of God so much so that they got a whole career path of chaplains to help the other soldiers and airmen and that kind of stuff out. So, but then not only that, my thing is, if you really believe that, then how do you reconcile the people who God used? How do you reconcile David slaying Goliath? How do you reconcile the angel of the Lord coming to Gideon and saying, you're gonna go fight. You're gonna go save the Israelites from the Midianites. Like, this is something that guys do. Revelation talk about a war that's gonna take place, between those who serve Satan or the beast and those who serve Christ. And so at the end of the day, and some people do think that God is evil because he allowed people to die. But one thing we can bank on when we live is that one day we're gonna die. Nobody lives forever, right? Until we get our glorified body, until Christ returns. And so at the end of the day, if God is the creator, he gets to determine when and how somebody's life here on this side of heaven is over. So that's kind of my take. Keith, he said, I believe that you can unquestionably defend others through lethal force and be a Christian. And here's something that came up when I was doing my research. I can't remember who said it, but I really like what he said. He was like, there's only one law. God don't have different laws for Christians and non-Christians. So for you to say that a Christian can't serve in these capacities, are you saying that nobody should serve in these capacities? Right? Because if somebody came in and broke in your house and trying to kill your family, are you going to pray to God and say, I hope some heathen, devil-worshiping police officer come and save us? No. Like, if it's wrong for a Christian to do it, it's wrong for a non-believer to do it. right? And so I thought that was a pretty interesting point. What's going on, Matthew? Thank you for checking in. All right, let's keep going through these comments. All right, this
Joe
is inter-
Joe
Go
said
ahead.
that link's not working because we're live. I think it won't let him jump on.
It won't.
Yeah, he tried to jump on.
Um, you gave him the link for the
The
interview,
one that
right?
I had, yeah, the one that I had. So
To call in here. That's
yeah,
weird. I thought people called in before when we were live. That's I don't know. I don't have Joseph number. I would try to resend it. I would try to send it to see just to see if it works. But yeah, I'm not sure. I thought for sure he could be able to get on with that link. Let me
you know
send a
what?
link to let me send a link to you one more time, Anthony, just to make sure you got the right one.
Yeah, let me, because it worked for me. I know what I'm gonna send him.
I don't know that I have Joseph's number. Let me see if I got his number.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, I don't have it. Okay.
okay,
Yeah. Well, if he
go ahead.
can't get on, hopefully he can let us know in the comments. All right.
All right.
Let me see. Matthew 24, verse 6. Mm, that's a good point. Let me pull this up. He says, Matthew 24, verse 6. Let's pull that up, see what it says. I believe that's the turn of the cheek, if I'm not mistaken.
I think that's the one I was talking about earlier. That I was wondering if we were going to get to it.
He said, Matthew 24, verse 6 through 14. All right, let's go. Let's see what it says. Oh, yeah, he's in now. Yeah, I'm about to say, I thought,
Got him? Yeah, I just
yeah,
resent it. Yeah,
I thought it would work.
I think I sent the wrong one.
Let's see. All right, so now this is gonna be interesting, y'all, because I did not set up this for three people. So y'all gonna be able to see. Y'all gonna see me go live trying to add Joseph in and doing everything. So one, that was a lot faster than I thought it would be. All right, what's going on, Joe?
Not bad, not bad at all.
What's up, guys?
What's up,
Nothing
bro?
much. Yeah. So listen, I didn't even plan this either, but I know you want to talk about this, and it just so happened. So I was telling Anthony, I was like, I know it's kind of late. I hope Joseph can see this and get on, because I know you were saying we got different
Yeah.
views. But let's look at what Matthew says, and then we're gonna have you get your points, and we'll keep the conversation going. But I want to see what Keith Taylor is trying to tell us. All right, so Matthew starting at verse 6, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nations will go to war against nations and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famine and earthquakes in many parts of the world, but all of this is only the first birth pains, with more to come. Then you will be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers. And many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and will deceive many people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved, and the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the whole world so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come. So, Keith, you're going to have to give me a little more context of
Context, yeah.
of what you're trying
Yeah.
to say there. I think that's just talking about what what's to come. How we know when the end is going to come. It does say there'll be wars and rumors of war, so somebody's going to be fighting in the wars. The question is it wrong for Christians to do it? All right, let me see real quick if I can do this. Go three people. All right, cool. There we go. All right. Okay, Joe, you heard some of the show so far. We haven't got your
Yeah.
viewpoints yet. I know in my devotional we kind of talked about Romans, and when it talks about the government authorities, and I believe Carl had another comment about the government authorities as well that I'm gonna bring up after you give your take. But yeah, what's your thoughts on it? Can you be a Christian and serve in the military? Let's start there.
Um, so, in a stunning turn of events, the quick answer I'm going to give is yes. Um, so, I think, like anything, this involves people, so it means it's nuanced. I think the second that you start throwing wide angle lenses at folks and say, you're not a real Christian because X, fill in the blank, serve in the military, you're a cop, you're whatever, you wear a uniform.
You vote for the
Um,
wrong person.
right for
Yeah.
the wrong person, you're punching up at that point. Like it's not, you're so far above your pay grade trying to figure out who's in, who's out, all that kind of stuff. Now, I think um I think a lot of my viewpoints on this can get summed up into the idea of a Christian serving in the military and fighting in a war is an example of exactly how man has made it how it's not supposed to be. I mean that in the grand scheme, and I mean that for all of mankind. I don't mean that for, like, Christians doing it. That's an example of how it should not be. I just mean wars in general, fighting in general, the conflict in general, all of that kind of stuff is an example of humankind and their propensity for creating conflict and issue and all of that kind of stuff. Um, I think at minimum, that's where you start the conversation. When it comes to whether or not, um, I think when it comes to the question of whether or not a Christian can serve, I think the next question immediately you have to ask is, where does your allegiance, where do you draw that line of where your allegiance lies? Because I think you can I think you can figure different people would put that differently. Um, Rico, I heard some of the stuff that you were saying as far as the Old Testament, um, and I would definitely push back against that because you're talking about a different time and a different place, a different circumstance and a different situation than modern day. But regardless of whether or not you would include um, defending people, defending country, defending, whatever, and where exactly you would put that peg, I think, regardless of the specifics, you have to figure out um, where what how do I reconcile the allegiance to country versus the allegiance to my God? And are you willing to put yourself in the position that you would be should your country make you do something that conflicts with what your God says to do? And and that's where all of this gets sketchy. I think my wife actually just today said it best. Like, she encapsulated this the best that I could. Regardless of how you feel about the system, love the individual. So, like, hating people or showing contempt towards Christians who serve in the military is not the right course of action. That's a misstep in a very, very large degree, regardless of whether or not you agree or disagree. Um, but I don't think it's as nuanced to say that every single Christian who serves in the military is wrong, because some folks um, join to help their family, and um, they work a desk job their entire time, or they work on mechanic work the entire time, or whatever. They never see conflict. They never see any of that kind of stuff. They never do anything that would put them at odds with a biblical calling, with a biblical standard. So if we say all Christians are wrong, then you have to also include them. You also have to go there and say that those people are wrong too. And trying to paint with that broad of a brush is not, that's a misstep. You know what I mean? So I think we need to take the time to be willing to take it at its pieces rather than take the entire concept. But by and large, um, I I I think the fact that I think for me, part of where the wheels fall off isn't so much at the individual; it's at the system, and the system being more designed in terms of self interest for the country rather than any kind of virtuous or noble position. And that's where you have to start asking ethical questions for the Christian in supporting the system. Now, that being said, I can't remember which one of you guys I heard say um, that you whatever you do unto the Lord, was what you said.
Yeah. Colossians
Now,
3:23.
if right, so if you step forward and say, okay, in this role, in this job that I am signing up for, I am going to submit to you as my superior. Your commanding officer, your whatever that person ahead of you is. Okay, well that the Bible's pretty specific about, right? Like doing those things the best that you can, and all of those kinds of things as well. And so I think I think in some degrees this is just a person taking a job. Whatever that job looks like, I think that's just a person taking a job.
Yeah.
I think where we would probably start to, I would guess, start to um diverge more, like, and have there be a more clear cut, like we don't necessarily sit on the same side, is the virtues of what you're plugging the Christian into versus whether or not it's blatantly right or wrong to plug a Christian into the system. That makes sense?
Yeah. Basically, the role they're gonna take, right?
Yes, but one of the things about me is that at a wide angle lens. See, I'm trying to part of why it seems like I'm super choppy on trying to express myself is because if I allow myself to go buck wild, it will absolutely come out as, like, my anti-patriotic side will start to come out, and that's not what this conversation's about. Like, that's not helpful to the actual discourse that's taking place. So that is baked into it, that it's kind of like me poking at the system itself that you're plugging Christians into. But yes, also I do think it matters, because again, where you would stick that ethical peg into the board, I think matters in where you conceive of at what layer is a Christian okay or not okay within the larger paradigm of the military.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, and like I said when I commented on the video I saw for you all, I think me and you are probably, other than your anti-patriotic views, we're probably closer when it comes to God than, hey, at the end of the day, God's our ultimate master. If somebody asks me to do something that's not in line with God, that's where I draw the line. Me being in the military, I did a lot of reading and studying on the book of Daniel and like how Daniel was able to get favor and rise in a government under leaders who clearly forced them to learn about other gods and other pagans, and do things that wasn't not in line with his God. But when they told him that he can't pray to his God, that's where he drew the line. And I can say for me, I can't speak for anybody else, that if the military ever asked me to do something that I felt was completely against what God said, then I'm willing to take the consequences of saying no to doing that. Now, the question is though, is people differ on where's that line, right? So like some people say, hey, you took the vaccination, so that's, God would never allow you to take the, so people can go whatever, and that's between the Holy Spirit. Now, if it's crystal cut clear in the Word of God that you shouldn't do it, then it is what it is. And I think this conversation though is more so on the lines, at least the way the question was posed, because the Royal Marines, they're like the special ops. It was more so on the pose of, hey, if I join the military and I got to kill, am I sinning? And I personally, based off of, and I get that the Old Testament is under an old covenant, but it wasn't like a law or nothing. It wasn't like the Ten Commandments I was referencing. It was God Himself sending people to fight in wars. God Himself said David was a man after His heart. So, regardless of if we were under the old covenant or the new covenant, God's character is still the same. God is not going to have somebody do something that's sinful. It's the point that I was trying to make by the old referencing the Old Testament. And then there's one other point I want to make, and I know Anthony probably got something brewing up, but there's one scripture that I want to show real quick and get y'all thoughts on this, because this is a particular passage that I personally go to when I'm serving in the military and I know my leaders have beliefs that are against my beliefs, right? Or or I'm working with people who I know we believe in two different things or whatever. This is the passage that I go to, and I'm curious on y'all thoughts on this particular passage. So, where is it at? It's Second Kings. I'll start at hold on, wait, I gotta find it. Cause now I lost it. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I'll start at verse 17. It says, then Naaman said, all right, but please allow me to load two of my mules with earth. This is the guy who, the prophet healed him, told him what to do so he can be healed. So he said, allow me to load two of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other God except the Lord. So he gave his life to God. But then on verse 18, and this is the verse I'm talking about, he said, however, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master, the king, goes into the temple of the god Rimmon to worship there and leans on my arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow to. So here's a guy who gave his life to God, but he also has a duty and a job that requires him to help his leader pray to this false god. And he's like, look, this is how I make my living. This is what I do. So me personally, I'm only going to pray, sacrifice, worship the true Lord. But when my boss does this and he lean on me, will God pardon me when I bow? And the prophet said, go in peace. And he went home. And so to me, I think that's a point to consider when you have a job or you have a military service and your bosses and your leaders are not serving the God that you serve. I still think that God judges our personal hearts. He judges on our hearts. So what's y'all thoughts on that particular passage in reference to this question?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I, I I think I get the principle here, because I think anybody who's ever worked for any company, any job, has had to deal with um, things in that job that I may not necessarily agree with, but yet, and I may not necessarily do. And I'll give an example of being a coach. So, being a coach, and this is not exactly the same thing as what we're seeing here, but being a coach, I've been on teams where if anybody's been around sports, you know, there's a lot of profanity. There's a lot of joking. There's a lot of things that will be overtly. You're like, whoa. To motivate a kid, they're gonna you bleeping this and this and that, to go. And I've always been the individual who, within that context, you know, I wasn't the one that motivated that way. But yet I'm standing next to a coach who's doing that on a regular basis. And he's not a Christian, so he doesn't believe what I believe, and so I can't tell him, hey, don't do that, or and even if he was a Christian, that'd be something that we would have a good enough relationship for me to say, hey, that's not the way we want to portray ourselves. But ultimately, he's doing something that, as an assistant coach on the field, uh, I'm not running up to him saying, hey, man, don't you do that. Don't talk to these kids that way. But yet at the same time, coaching those kids up right alongside him, but at the whole time disagreeing, with what's happening here. And so being put in that position, I understand that position. Um, Honestly, I've never looked at this passage and applied this type of a conversation to it. And so this is just my initial thoughts. I think I'm going to have to look at it more and process it a little bit more on what I really, understand about this, because again, this is Old Testament. This is a very, this is a specific time, a specific situation. And I'm trying to look at the principle here and see how it extrapolates and if it is applicable to other situations. And so the closest thing I can get to is that coaching experience where I'm coaching with someone who is, going at the kids hard, not necessarily, not necessarily quote unquote wrong, but they're using this type of language to motivate them. And I'm not a person that uses that language, but yet I'm a coach next to them, and saying, well, but that's not me. I'm not doing that. And so I think that's as close as I could get to this. And so I feel like I need to process this more, because this is an interesting take, because I've never looked at that passage that way.
Yeah. I would say the same. I would say something very similar. I'll mirror what Ant did, and I'll grab for a an experience that I could pull, I guess. In during 2020, I got licensed to sell life insurance, and the dude that I got licensed under was pulling some really grimy stuff when it came to selling and all of that kind of stuff, just dirty stuff. And so I ended up parting ways and not doing business with him and all of that kind of stuff. So um eventually, like but part of it was, you know before I had finally had enough. We did work side by side, even though I disagreed with what he was doing. And so yeah, I do think that there is a world where Christians are pulled into a situation um that where the people around them are doing things that are counter to their integrity, conviction, whatever. Um, I too, though, when it comes to putting it, like, to try and bridge that gap to say that it would be applicable here, I think I would have to do more due diligence. But I would ask, it and this kind of goes even deeper into the entirety of pulling in Old Testament into these conversations, like you were talking about David and all of that. And I agree, God's characters is unchanging, it's unfailing, all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, though, um how applicable really is this? What is the context, and what does that really say to the topic at hand? um so, yeah, it is an interesting take. It certainly is, to be able to pull that in. And it's one of those things that I guess I can appreciate from a guy that I think is generally biblically sound and all of that kind of stuff, like you are, Rico. um to hear the references that you're making in relation to this. David, I have heard before. That is the one that you've referenced that I have heard before. But some of the others that you have used, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That's different.
Yeah, and I'm not
And it
making.
forces me to think.
And here's the thing, I want to be clear. I'm not taking this passage and saying that this is a passage that say military members can serve and kill. What I
Right,
took from
right.
what
No,
I took
no.
from this passage
Yeah, no.
was what I took from this passage was this is somebody who has a job to
Right.
where he has to serve somebody
Yeah.
who's literally worshiping a whole nother God. And I know us as Christians will be like, that is definitely the cutoff. You shouldn't even be helping
Yeah.
this guy worship this other God. And this guy had enough he loved the Lord enough, and he realized that, hey, so in Second Kings, the context of this, he goes to Elijah to be healed, and Elijah wouldn't even come out and see him, and so he was upset and everything. And long story short, he gets healed. Once he gets healed, he realized that the God of the Israelites is the true God, and he converts over. He say, this is gonna be the God I worship from here on. However, when I go back to work and my boss kneels down and pray, will God forgive me for kneeling down with him? And
Right.
what I'm saying is, when I look at this, I look at it as, by Elijah saying go in peace, I think it's in line with New Testament teaching that God judges our heart. God knows that this person now serves him, not this God that his master is laying that he's praying to. And so he's just doing his job there. And who knows, in a certain season of life, God may remove him from that position and move him from that job. But the point, I just brought that up to say that here this guy was in a situation where he had a job that required him to do something that would go against God.
So, and honestly, at sniff test, and again with the giant asterisk that I said before about needing to do further due diligence to really come to a concrete stance on this. At sniff test, I don't disagree with what you're saying.
Right.
Like I can absolutely see what you're talking about as far as um, this being very much in line with New Testament teaching that our hearts are judged and that our motives are judged and all of those kinds of things. And that's why I said what I said before about this being nuanced, because you can look at the different layers of this thing and say, what is actually happening, where is a person's heart in all of this, like all of those kinds of things. I don't think that's it's messy to try and dissect the layers, because to go back to the question as it was posed about Christians military killing, is it a sin? um I think once you get past the layer of this is a picture of exactly how humans muck this thing up and make the and screw this thing up royally and universally. Once you get past that point, then you start to have to ask those questions of, okay, you had mentioned, you brought in the idea of police and all of that into it as well. And I know, Rico, you were military police. um you know I am by no stretch of the imagination, again, this is where, like, I have to put the stuff in the box that's like not helpful to the conversation and all of that kind of stuff, because I've got a lot of opinions and most of them are not nice. But I mean, I think really you could probably boil down a lot of the questions into, okay, so let's say, in a hypothetical situation, you took a life because you were defending somebody, and that was like, or that generally defending somebody else or defending yourself, like those tend to be the two big staple points that you would ask that question about. Okay, now what happens, like, I guess to me, more question needs to be asked in investigating these things on what happens if you're stepping into a situation as a Christian where you are taught that this person over here is your enemy. They are wrong, they are bad. And you are because of a flawed situation and a flawed system being forced into a position where now in your mind you have to defend yourself. What just because all of those things, if all of those things were flawed up until the point where you thought that you were defending yourself, but in that moment you were bought in, sold out, like in that split second decision you really thought that you were defending yourself, like pure, I'm talking if you were to judge a person's heart and they were to come clean and say I really thought that I was defending myself, where does that land, and how much does that conflict with, not murdering and all of that kind of stuff. I think when you start to pull at the individuals and say, because you are a soldier, because you have killed, because you have taken a life, you are going to hell. Full stop. Do not ask questions. Do not pass go. I think, Rico, you and I have had this conversation in other settings, that you and I both know the sting of divorce
Yeah.
and what that looks like. And I don't know about you, man, but I and my wife both have had that conversation with folks that we're going to hell. Like I'm going to hell. The fact that I'm a pastor is totally out of pocket, and
Yeah.
and with my wife, I've drug her to hell along with me and all that, and all that kind of stuff. That's that so anytime that you draw that unequivocal line of, because you have done this, you have automatically signed yourself up for hell. No, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. And even if, let's play devil's advocate on the other side here for a second and say, okay, let's say you're going to find out one day that as a soldier, you took a life, and in that moment, you sinned. Okay, what does then the Bible say about our sins, and about our ultimately our continued walk with God? Like, let's say you sinned, but I believe you, Rico, to be a bought in, sold out Christian. I believe you to be a devout Christian that walks with the Lord and all of that kind of stuff. So let's say that action happens. Post that action, you continue walking with the Lord, all of those kinds of things. Does that mean that one sin has now been laid against you for the rest of time?
Right.
You know what I
No.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's why you got to plug it into the big picture. You know what I mean? As to all of what we understand the character of God to be. Even if I can look at what you're saying about the unchanging character of God in relation to the Old Testament and be like, I'm not sure your math is math in there, but still, at the end of the day, the unchanging character of God would still dictate that grace is sufficient, mercy is sufficient, that God is sufficient, and that this whole situation is bigger and more complex than a single solitary act of sin. Because if sin is sin, then it doesn't matter if you're in the military and you've taken a life, or if you're at home and you've looked at porn. It's your sin is sin then. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It brings up um, this comment. He says, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. If you know you're going to have in a possession a weapon and a position to kill, your conscience beforehand, would you know, are you serving God, your country, or the need for money? Let's see, the need the money and opportunities to be successful. You still chose to kill. And so, again, I think the point that we're getting at, and I think it boils down to what Matthew commented. So I guess it really comes down to whether "don't kill" or "don't murder" is the correct translation. in Matthew. And I know Anthony, you know you can pull up the Greek and the he, I believe it would be Greek, um, for that translation. No, actually, it'd probably be Hebrew for that translation
Hebrew, yeah.
because it's the old commandment. But at the end of the day, if you look at any translation other than the King James, they typically say "Thou shalt not murder." And then if you look at the actual Hebrew word for that, murder is I think kill can also be used, but in that context, they're talking about murder. And the reason why is because like you'll have some passages again, Old Testament where God say love the enemy, but then he'll turn around and say, "Hey, you need to kill them. Or if they do this, put them to death. Or they should be put to death." So it can't be thou shalt not kill in the sake of just taking of one's life. Is more so in the sense of murder. Is what that's talking about. And so at the end of the day, at the end of the day, the question is, can you be a Christian and serve in the military? I believe that the answer is yes. I believe that you can. I believe that even if you do have to take a life, I don't believe that that does not make you a Christian. And I like Joe's point of um, even if that was a sin, the God's blood, God, what God did on the cross, take care of that. Keith says,
I told
"Oh, go ahead."
I told a woman today. I told a woman today who just lost her husband. Um, that I fundamentally 110% believe that on Thursday he went to sleep and woke up in the presence of the Lord. He he served his country. He was part of the 82nd Airborne at a time where the conflict that he was a part of was a friggin' mess, just a mess on all sides. So you could probably with some measure of confidence say tell what he had to do and all of that. Um, so if the answer is no, then that made a liar out of me. Then that means that I lied to a woman straight to the face today.
Yeah,
And so it's I think, and I'm glad that I didn't realize right away what that you had emailed me, because I think I needed to sit with what you said for a minute before reacting to it, because it felt like Rico asked you a question and then you went into inherent bias, and I'm like, oh dude, you dodged. That was a nice slip the jab that you just did, because you didn't actually answer the question. um but even if it wasn't like even if it wasn't like complete a one for one answer to the direct question, it's still a good point that when you look at this with an inherent bias and see nothing but the uniform, which trust me, my, this my grandfather-in-law passing away just on Thursday has softened my heart in a major way, because I could tell you that at a different point in time I would have only saw the uniform. So I'm speaking from the experience of being the man who would only see the uniform. It's short-sighted, and it really is about bias. Like, if you really think that a Christian can't do a job, then what does that say about your view of the Imago Dei, and what does that say about your view of God? Just being honest about it. And once you get into the actual practicality of all of it and all of that kind of stuff, oh, that's where I'm liable to have a much different tune about the actual application layer of the military and all of that kind of stuff. But if we're talking about the God piece, if we're talking about the unfailing, unchanging character of God in all of that, yeah, no, that's when you have to start having the conversation of grace, mercy, love, all of those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
There's one
think
more comment.
go ahead.
I'll let you go, Anthony. But there's one more comment I want to touch on, and then there's two videos I want to show before we land the plane. But go ahead, Anthony.
No, I because I saw your comment. I would like to hear more about the bias piece, you know, and yeah, I think for you, depending on context, right? There's just an automatic no. You know, you
Mm.
can't do this because of my experience, because of what the uniform, the badge, the whatever it is surrounding it suggests to me. It will make me automatically, you know, say no. Like I said, the famous lines of Furious Styles, the military is no place for a black man, right? You know, hearing that in a movie that was, you know, geared towards African Americans and was so watched, you know, there's a lot of people that walked away from that. That was their idea of, yes, see, Furious Style said it. This is a person acting in a movie, right? But that, you know, puts hint of bias into your idea of all of these things. You know, I have a friend that's a police chaplain, awesome guy, mighty man of God, you know, and he's, you know, like I said, military chaplain at one point, you know, these different instances where you're saying, okay, well, if they're in that uniform, then they're wrong. And I think that, as you said, Joe, that's a bias because it's automatic. I'm just saying it's automatic if that's where you're at. And I think we can't do that with anything. We actually have to take it case by case, situation by situation. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you were going to look at Keith Taylor's comment, Rico, because I think that's what I've been talking about this whole time. Is that how do I judge somebody's motive? You know, if somebody goes over there and just says, "Yeah, I'm going over here to kill these people because, as Joe said, I've been taught to hate them," then
Right.
you know how does God see that? You know, how does a Christian see that? You know, how do we judge that? You know, it's one of those things that's where is your heart posture? Where is your motive? Is it truly, as you said, Joe, self-defense, that I'm defending myself, I'm defending my country, I'm defending, you know, our ability to have liberties and so forth and so on. But if I already have in my head that that's wrong, no matter what, you know, your reason is, just because you put on that uniform, then yeah, I just, you know, we can't even have the conversation, you know, and there's other things like that across the board, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I man, when I was 16, 17, I was beat by a police officer. Beat, left on the side of the road, and I could have easily jaded the way I see cops. I could have easily had an all cops are bad kind of mentality. And to a point, I'll be honest, when I see a state trooper, I do just seeing the state trooper, I do feel, you know,
Something.
some something, right? Um, but at the same time, by me becoming a cop and joining the military, I realized that it's just people. You know, people. They got on uniform. As some people are gonna be Christian, some people are not gonna be Christian. Some people are gonna be do a righteous job. Some people are gonna be power hungry, and you can't just give a blanket judgment on people. You know, and
Yep.
that's just how it is. And I'll be honest, in some of these positions, especially when it comes to politicians who making decisions, you kind of want a Christian in there that's gonna represent what we represent and what we believe in, right? Um, now, we also know that the Antichrist is gonna come and do what the Antichrist do. I'm almost certain he's gonna do it, do some kind of political government type system, um, and so it's gonna come a time where we have to say, hey, can I be a part of this and serve God? I don't know that we're there yet. I believe, like I said, at least in our country now, they still allow us to worship Jesus and love Jesus, and although they allow a bunch of other stuff too that we as Christians disagree with, but there, to Joe's point, there's gonna come a time where you say, "Hey, if I do this in this position, am I willing to say no to certain things because it's causing me to go against God?" But the comment that I wanted to have a conversation on before I showed the videos was this one, and I definitely want you and Joe's take on it because I know you all are pastors. So he says, Carl says the authorities were in reference to Yahweh's kingdom on earth, His kingdom come. There are carnal kingdoms as well and they have the assignment to steal, kill, and destroy, conquer, and overtake. And so I believe that's in reference to when I in the devotion when I quoted Romans. Carl, if you still on, just clarify. But I wanted to have a conversation about that to see, in fact, is that the case? Is this what Paul talking about in Romans 13? He says everyone must.
Okay, I was gonna ask.
Yep, Romans 13. What is this? Verse 1. Everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but in those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without fear of authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. The authorities are God's servants sent for your good. But if you're doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So you must submit to them, not only to avoid punishment, but to also keep a clear conscience. Then it goes into pay your taxes and all that. So to me, I don't know that he's talking about his kingdom when Jesus returned kingdom. I think he's talking about right now, the authorities right now. And even if he's not, there's another passage in I think it's Second Peter that echoes what Paul is saying here. Hold on, I'm trying to find it real quick.
1 Peter 2.
I mean, it's First Peter. Yeah, it's First Peter. Yeah. Anthony got that. Anthony got that photographic memory. Let's see.
Yeah.
What does it say? For the Lord's sake, submit to all human authority, whether the king as head of state or the officials he has appointed. For the king has sent them to punish those who do wrong and to honor those who do right. It is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. For you are free, yet you are God's slave. So don't use your freedom as an excuse to do evil. Respect everyone and love the family of believers. Fear God and respect the king. So to me, I think the Bible is pretty clear on we are supposed to that God placed these people in authority, whether they're doing right or wrong. Matter of fact, most people, you read 2 Kings, almost all of them jokers were doing wrong, messed up. But so God placed them in there, and we are to submit to them until they have us do something that goes against God. That's just what it is. And so Carl, I don't know if y'all want to add to that, but Carl, I don't think he was referencing the new kingdom. Excuse me.
No, I think I've had this discussion about that particular passage. And yeah, I think he's talking about the authorities of government authorities, human government authorities, that this idea of authority, of government, of putting people in position to protect the innocent, to punish the guilty. I think that's what that passage is about, and so is the one in Peter. It's about the same thing, and it's one of those things that this is a critique that people have on Paul, because he would say within the context that he was in, do the right thing even in a bad context, even in a bad scenario, bad situation. You're still held to a different standard. You don't get to just I'm just going to have bad behavior because maybe these rulers aren't just, they aren't right. Because if you keep reading in 1 Peter chapter 2, it says, even if they are evil and rude to you, you still are called to do the right thing, because that's what Jesus did, because he suffered so that we would have an example. Yeah, verse 18, you are slaves, submit to your masters with all respect. Do what they tell you, not only if they are kind and reasonable, but even if they are cruel. I hear people saying that's not fair right there. For God is pleased when conscious of his will, you patiently endure unjust treatment. Of course, you get no credit for being patient when you are beaten for doing wrong. But if you suffer for doing good and endure patiently, God is pleased with you. For God called you to do good, even if it means suffering, just as Christ suffered for you. He is your example, and you must follow in his footsteps.
Yeah.
Tough. That's a rough passage.
So but even if somebody wanted to let that go in one ear and out the other just because Paul said it, okay, then fine, let's go to Jesus. Because
Right.
it's not exactly the same thing, but Matthew 22, when he's talking to Peter about render to Caesar what is Caesar's, render to God what is God's. This is a tone and tenor that's present with Jesus's teaching as much as it is. Paul is just grabbing what Jesus did and reflecting that. That's all. So I do think I have heard the same, like Ant, I have heard this taken this kind of way before, and I think that this is just honestly over spiritualizing it a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Because
Teeny
it's
bit.
so hard. But it's also because it's so hard to um for all, I think all three of us can look at the realities of the system, and in our own ways can point to, not even like looking from a spectator's perspective, from a firsthand perspective, say about how the system has failed and all of that kind of stuff. And so to say that scripture says submit to authority when all you see around you is corruption and decay and a failed system and failed humans and all of that kind of stuff, and that's all that's on your mind when you see those things, it's very, very easy to then turn around and grab for this and start to spiritualize the concepts, so that way it means something other than, and I'm not saying this as I don't mean this as a dig. I don't mean that as a slight to anybody, like, because I think there's a very good chance that the individual who commented this probably learned this from somebody from someplace who may have also learned this from someplace. You know what I mean? I don't think it's some mustache twirling attempt to, misrepresent the Bible or something like that, because I think the reason why we have generations of misteachings is because they've become institutionalized. You know what I mean? So yeah, no, I would agree. Long story short, even if you've got a bone to pick with Paul being the one who says it, Jesus reflects the same thing. Like basically with this idea of, yo, there's a bigger picture to this whole thing. So like, yeah, in this very moment, whatever, give to Caesar what is Caesar. Get submit to authority. All of those kinds of things, because there's a bigger picture and bigger piece going on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if God set up these authorities, put these people in those places, then he can do it for Christians, which goes back to can a Christian serve in the military? Can a Christian be a police officer? Can a Christian be the president? Can a Christian be a politician? Whatever the case may be. These are establishments that God himself put together. So why can't a Christian work in those sectors? And that's kind of where I would talk. That's kind of where I was going in the devotion with it. All right, so let's look at a couple of these videos. The first video, and I may or may not play the whole thing, but the first video, and Joe, when I pull it up, you probably won't be on the screen. I'll try to pop you on there though. But the videos, one of them kind of talks about, I guess both of them hit on the same thing. I just like the different perspectives that they show. So I'll just show one and then I'll show the other. Let me find it. This first one's about on intruders.
So what?
The comments.
There was someone that's been pretty consistently saying that there is no accommodation for violence, and that Christ rebuked that. And then he was saying that, he was speaking from a personal experience, saying that he rebuked some intruders and they left.
They rebuked him with the word.
Yeah, good for you. So very proud of you.
Sorry.
So, but let's be real here, and let's not be buffoons. Okay, you live in a fallen world. There are evil people in this world who have evil intentions. Okay, and so God's law, not our emotions, have to be the standard. And right now, sir, I would say it sounds like off the cuff you're being ruled by your emotions and not Scripture. Because if you set up a standard that says that we're not allowed to do violence to another human being under any circumstance, then what you're doing is you're making God look like a sinner. Because if your standard of piety is don't do violence ever to any other human being, then you make God look like a sinner. So again, if I adopt your emotionally laden position that is not based on Scripture, and I say, okay, great, I'll adopt that, to perpetrate violence upon other human beings is actually wrong always. Then what I would say is, again, now we go to the Bible and we see what kind of a fallacious suggestion that is, because now it looks like God's a sinner, because he's telling people in his law that if somebody breaks into your house and you kill them in the process of them coming in to possibly present a mortal threat to you, you are in fact not guilty. That is a just and righteous thing to do. Or, for example, when we read the Psalms, and it says Psalm 144:1, blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. Not the same standard that you are holding to. That's an emotionally laden position that ends up hurting our neighbors. If you love your neighbor, you will perpetrate violence to the point of mortal blows to a person that is seeking to harm other human beings. So, for example, if I had a man come into my house and threaten to rape and murder my family, it would be a moral indictment upon me if I did nothing to stop him. So I would say that you, sir, are following a position that, call it emotional, don't call it biblical. Because again, if we adopt that pietistic standard that you've created, the Bible ends up looking like the heroes of the Old Testament and even the New are all sinners, and especially God, when he's commanding people to actually perpetrate violence upon evil people, that God himself is in sin. So what I would say is, number one, read your Bible. Number two, stop living based upon your emotions. This kind of...
All right, I'm gonna pause it there. I'm gonna be honest. When I hear somebody say that, hey, if you're in the military and you kill and all that, you're sinning. That's kind of where I look at it too. Even when people say if you drink alcohol, it's a sin. To me, I'm like, if you say that, you have to be careful, because you're essentially saying that Jesus sinned when he gave everybody alcohol, or you're saying that God sinned when he allowed, like this brother saying. Now he come at it kind of harder than I probably would come at it, but the reality of it is that when you think emotionally, sometimes you are saying things in a way that's saying what God did was wrong, which is why you have some non-believers say, well, God's a moral monster because God allowed this, God allowed that. And then I think Christians who say that also wrong are doing the same thing inadvertently. You know, what are y'all thoughts on his comments so far?
So for
Go ahead.
go ahead, Ant. Go ahead, Ant.
Well, I think, part of even listening to him and trying to weed through, his strong position in opposition to the other person's position. I don't like when people just take full extremes, to bring up, well, somebody's going to rape and murder my children and all. I think that's an emotional, argument. So to say, okay, that was an emotional argument, I think that's an emotional argument, because it's said to, pull on, an emotional reaction. Putting that aside, um, again, I go back to my thinking is that, uh, put in the right position, put in the wrong position, however you want to put it, defending your family, defending, a loved one, defending yourself. If you end up, mortally, taking someone's life, even our law has laws that uphold that. And if God put that in place to do that, and you're exonerated, now we don't know what was in your heart, right? That's going to be judged by God ultimately, right? But if my heart was to protect, to defend myself, then you can't say in an absolute that you can never, right, take a life, or that is sin. So I agree with that position there. I just think there's a lot of other things, that he kind of nuances in there, almost, he's kind of almost flippant a little bit, and degrading in the way that he's approaching it. But that doesn't mean that what he's saying is wrong. I do agree with that stance that, to say flat out it's wrong, period, under no circumstance. I do think you put yourself in a position where now reading the Bible becomes difficult, and you're going to have a different view on God.
Yeah. So part of what you're commenting on, Ant, is part of why I struggle to watch Apologia's stuff, because Apologia is very much that true grit Christianity, hyper masculine. I've got to defend mine, my own, my this, my that. You know what I mean? That sort of, you've got to be a real man does this sort of thing. That's very much Apologia's sway and how they do things. So to hear this dude say this, nothing is surprising about this. So that's number one. Then I guess 1A or 1B is then Keith, my man, I'm gonna go ahead and pick on you for a second because I can see his comment. I so agree with that video. I own a licensed firearm. If you run up in my crib at night, I'm lighting you up. I'm just saying, everybody's so quick to get emotional about this thing. If you run up on me, I'm going to shoot you.
Right.
What about steps A through Y before you get to step Z? What about, okay, somebody comes in, you want to, these kinds of comments of somebody comes in and they're saying that they're going to rape and pillage and they're going to do this and all this stuff. You're trying to elicit an emotional response. That's all you're doing. You're trying to stir people up because the people who are going to respond to your emotionalism are going to respond to you with solidarity. That's what, literally, I can tell you from years of sitting in front of a microphone, that's the name of the game. That's part of it. Is you stir the emotionalism of somebody, and you're going to get the people who are going to feed off of that emotionalism. Preachers do it, politicians do it, comedians do it, TV personalities, that's literally the name of the game. And so, are we actually thinking through the entirety of the situation before we jump straight to, oh, well, it is my responsibility to defend? Okay, so how come defending means that you got to come to blows? How come defending means that you got to shoot somebody? How come defending means all of those things? What about every single other thing that comes up to that? What about subduing? I won't even say nonviolence. Let's say nonviolence. But see that's the thing. What step do I take if you run into my house at night? You could subdue a person. I'm like, Ant, I do, dude. You're from the part of the world where we're from, and you're built like a brick house, like he and I are. You're probably gonna end up working security. That's probably gonna be at some point in your story, you're gonna end up working security at places. Subdue, okay? I don't need a gun to subdue you at all. But again, even just with what I just said, that goes to Ant's second point. You can't paint with this wide angle brush that says, okay, it's complete and total nonviolence. It's complete and total, I can never, ever do these things, because then you do have a hard time reading the Bible, because then you do have a hard time with all of it. But even if it's that, even if the emotionalism is this sense of pride, or I've got to jump to this, or I've got to, you're not rationally thinking through the situation if you're immediately jumping all the way to the end of the conversation. So I don't necessarily disagree with the thesis statement. The thesis statement being that we have to hold to a biblical standard. We have to hold to okay, if the standard is that all of these things are in place, and if there is a nuance point to be had to all of this, then okay, then fine, there's a nuance point, and I submit to that. That's fine. But also, like Ant said, what's in your heart matters. And if you're so hell-bent on defending means this, and you're not willing to see any of the other options, that you're so blinded by what you think defending means, then yeah, that's a heart issue. That's not that's what that is. So I think that when you address it in those kinds of ways, that doesn't lend, he thinks he's lending this air of nuance to it, to the conversation. And by he, I realize that there's two he's that are a part of this conversation. Keith, I'm not, the only comments that I'm making about you as were in reference to your comments. When I'm saying he, I mean the dude from Apologia. It's not adding anything to the conversation other than to elicit a response. And obviously, clearly he did.
So I wasn't gonna play the rest of it, but I think, to be fair, now we should probably listen to the rest of what he has to say. Now, so before I play the rest of it, though, I'll tell you, I'm not gonna even lie about it. It probably is a heart issue, but I agree with Keith on it not being emotional. I'm telling you now, I was trained instinctively, 2 shots to the chest, 1 to the head. If somebody come in my house and my kids are upstairs and my wife is in there, I'm not thinking about tussling with him. I'm not thinking about none of that. I'm going to give him a very loud command to stop what he's doing and move on. But if he show any kind of quickness,
but there it is, Rico. There it is, Rico.
There it is.
That's
you just did
because
it.
I'm sitting here thinking this in my head the whole time. The first thing I do is I have a weapon and I will use it. You need to move on. If you do not,
that's it.
And to be honest, so Keith, right again, I don't know Keith Hart, but looking at this, I think Keith point is making, I got a firearm and I will use it. I think that's essentially what he's saying. I would assume with somebody who's a licensed firearm who's defending their family, they're not going to just go automatically to just killing everything moving. I don't know. Maybe he will. I don't know.
Correct. He said correct.
Correct.
Okay.
He says correct.
He said correct.
And so in a statement like this, like, we have a microphone so we can explain ourselves. Keith is just typing a couple words. So and so
thank you.
So for me, I'm just saying though,
that's not a given though. I just want to say that's not a given. That's 100% not a given. That's not that is an individual layer, and you hope that an individual has the sense to do that. But that's why all of the little idiosyncrasies matter and all of that kind of stuff, because 110%, it is not a given. We would not have seen half of the tragedies. We wouldn't have seen a tenth of the tragedies. Like, we would have not, this world would be a much different place if that really was a given. So no, that's not a fair statement to say that I know the first steps. Like, but that's great that you see it as a given, but it's just simply not. Like, that's giving far too much credit to individuals that you think that just because you have a piece of paper, why do so many people have a piece of paper that says that they have a license to drive a motor vehicle, but people do stupid stuff behind the wheel of a car literally every single day. So you know what I mean? Like, that's where the idiosyncrasies of all of that really do come into play. And you can't, and that's why I jumped on what I did, is because that's not, like, humans have shown time and time and time again. I don't care if you're a civilian. I don't care if you're military. I don't care if you're a cop. I don't care what your position or your post is. People have shown over and over and over again that they do not have the nuance to be able to responsibly wield the power of the firearm. That's part of the issue here. If that wasn't an issue, then this wouldn't be an issue. If those things really were ingrained in the human mind to the point where they really were second nature, just because you have a license, then we wouldn't be having this conversation in any way, shape, or form. But they're not. They're just simply not.
Yeah. No, that's a valid point. But what I will say is the average person who has a license wants to be a law-abiding citizen, right? The other jokers who can care less and want to break the law, they're gonna break the law. I think there are some denominations of Christianity that will say you shouldn't kill that person ever. And for me, that's where I agree. Maybe not the way he delivered it, but the guy from Apologia Radio, I agree that, hey, at the end of the day, Ecclesiastes said there is a time for different things, and I'll just leave it at that. Let me look at some of these comments, then we'll finish these videos because we've been going for a minute. If people are coming in your home at night, knowing someone is possibly home, I don't believe they come in with any good intentions. They come with firearms to harm you, to get whatever they had set or out to do. Yeah, possibly. Yeah. Again, and I don't even think that Joe is saying that, hey, they come in, just be all hugs and cupcakes and pray for them.
Right.
He's just saying,
Absolutely not.
It's a hard issue if your first instinct is, well, I'm just going to kill them regardless, right? And so again, he said, as he said, you are on live. I replied via text. I said, my house, not yours. If you protect yours different, that's your thing. Yeah. Again, I think Joe is trying to say it's a heart. We should check our heart in these situations. Me, Keith, and Sean, in this case, are like, hey, they come in, I'm probably use a firearm. You know, simple as that. I'm not as big as Anthony, so I mean, and at the end of the day, in that particular situation, I'm not gonna even give him the chance to get the best of me and then still be able to take care of my family. But at the same time, my heart is not to kill somebody. My heart is not to have to kill that person. So I'm definitely, because I'm trained to do it, probably gonna shoot him 2 times in the chest and aim 1 time for his head. If he somehow survives that, I'm also been trained to give him first aid care until authorities arrive, which I believe in my heart that I would do that once I've minimized the threat, once the threat is done. But as long as there's still a threat, and again, this may be a heart issue or just may be the way I'm trained. When we have an active shooter situation, somebody can be in front of me dying. I'm not even helping that person until I eliminate the threat. And so I'm not even, at the end of the day, I'm trying to stop this threat with the lowest, with the lowest means necessary. But if you come to my house at night and I'm half sleeping, delusional, or whatever, I'm probably shooting you. That's just the reality of it. And I think what we're getting at is some people just will say, as a Christian, you shouldn't even consider that. And I think that's where I think all of us will agree that that's not the case.
Yeah, I would chime in and say this. I think that was the point that I was making earlier before this conversation even picked up at this point, is that from a person who is not trained, a person who is not ex-military, ex-police, ex-forest ranger, just a regular human being, right? With just a regular person, you're not going to be, instinctively thinking, draw 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, done, right? What you said earlier is that I'm going to give a loud command, and if this person doesn't comply, then this is what's going to happen. I've never been trained, but that's my instinct, is to give you a warning that if you don't leave now, prepare to be shot, prepare to be harmed, at that particular point, rather than you're in my house, die, right? I just think that wouldn't be instinctive to me. And so when you said that, I was like, that to me would be my instinct, is leave now or be shot, you know. And I think like Keith was saying, he's replying through a text, and so in his mind, if he has been trained, he's already done that process, right? That's already, that's why he's saying it's a given. But like I said, my training, and then we're on live air again, and we can't take, you can't automatically take that for granted. You know, I guarantee that there are people that are on that aren't trained that would not know that, oh yeah, that is absolutely what you do because that's what you're trained to do. Because I was getting ready to ask the question that, you know, people with a license, right? Is there training when you get a license, or can you just go and just pay for a license and get, is there training? Do they tell you what to do if there is an intruder in your home? Is there any training before giving me this, right? Before giving me this weapon that could end someone's life? You know, and I was going to ask that question. And, you know, anybody out there that knows,
I have a license.
please chime in.
I can't speak for every state, but Georgia didn't give me any training. They just did a background check and sent me the license.
And you got your,
yeah. Pennsylvania doesn't really have, like, they've got a seminar that you can, like, that you go through and all that kind of stuff, but it's not like anything super intensive or anything like that. So yeah, no, that's I guess my, is it to be the third one to chime in on the whole it's a given thing. That's where I'm coming from. Like, I understand that you know, I could read between the lines as far as what Keith is saying, that he is that he's military or ex-military or whatever. Okay, so that's a different thing, right? That's a different thing that, like, right now, like, as far as the it's like what I said before about the application layer of the system of the military, all of that kind of stuff. That's a different conversation. That I'm going to put that in the box over here of things that I don't want to say because it will 100% derail the conversation. But when it comes to just because you have a license, that it is a given, no. If it was standardized, intensive, you have to do XYZ, whatever, even if you had to do XYZ, it's still dependent on, you're still handing, honestly, the opportunity and the freedom to operate a firearm in the hand of a person, of a flawed person, of a flawed individual. And so there's literally no way to say, oh, it's a given and all of that. You would hope that there's that at least, like, regardless of where you're at in the whole thing, like whether or not you should have the gun, whether or not like that moment of stop what you're doing or else actions have consequences. Because you're still showing an intentionality at that point. Just saying, just like, without asking any questions, without investigating at all, pulling out a gun and shooting somebody if they're in your home, like, no, I'm gonna be the one that says it's cool. I'll be the one that takes the heat on this one, and openly states, like, no, you don't ask any questions, you don't do any due diligence, you don't do any of that. I've got a gun. You're in my house, therefore you're getting shot. No, I'm sorry. That's a heart matter. You know what I mean? That's a heart issue, and I'm not. That's issue. Before even.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's before even incorporating in the military portion of it. Like, I'm trying very hard to be judicious in my responses, because I don't want to paint with broad strokes here. I don't want to turn around and just end up doing the same thing that some of the other folks are doing, just slanted in a different angle and all of that kind of stuff. So this doesn't have anything to do with, I would say this universally, outside of just the context of the military, because when you bring in the military portion and you talk about this training that you have and all of that kind of stuff, I'm like, yo, there's some aspects of this that seem like they conflict with the teachings of Jesus, with the how you're trained. But I don't know enough to go out on the limb and say definitively, this is my hardline stance. This is what I have formulated about every single thing, because there's layers within it that I don't have the full and complete information. And so at best I would be going half cocked saying those things and all of that kind of stuff. But when you start talking about I'm doing this and not caring for the person who's wounded, I'm doing this and not asking questions, I'm doing this first and foremost, I think situations and circumstances can bring a person to thinking about things in a way that, as Christians, I have a hard time reconciling those things. I'm not going to sit here and say you're in sin, you're a sinner, you're a heathen, you can't be a Christian, you can't be again, punching up. That's above my pay grade. Whether or not you're a Christian is no matter of mine, because I'm still called to love on you. I'm still called to do all the things as a Christian. But that mindset thing runs deep. That heart matter thing runs deep, regardless of how justified that we think that we are in that moment, whatever that case may be. And this is where it gets down to some of the more nuancy things. That's kind of why I'm trying to, because I could come on here and just blurt off at the mouth and just start running my mouth off and say this, that, and the other, and just to stir the pot and all of that kind of stuff. But I think there's value in having in a show like this, in a context like this. Ant and I have our own version of a context like this, where it's Christians coming together, having these conversations, all of that kind of stuff that can be very, very powerful, even when you disagree, as long as everybody's coming with the spirit of, I'm not trying to be the one that's going to sit up here and be a jerk, even though I know I'm saying the thing that is, not the popular thing to say within the situation and circumstance. So I'm not trying to take a shot at you, Rico. I'm not trying to take a shot at you, Keith, or you, or anybody else who may be watching who is military or has a license or would say that they would defend their home like that. But what I am saying is that mindset thing, that heart posture thing, that's a killer, dude. Like that's a very real component. That's why I say what I say about what happens when being put in these situations puts you in conflict with the Bible, with God, with scripture, with all of that, without being egregious. Nobody's putting a gun to your head and saying you have to worship this other God. No, that's not going to happen. But it doesn't have to be that extreme. And that's where I would seriously counsel anybody to do that legwork at a heart level and all of that kind of stuff, because that's very, very important. It's not for me to comment on. I'm just blanketly saying, do that heart work if you're going to be in that situation, especially if you're going to say, I'm going to do these things in response to X situation.
Yeah. Well, I think we hammered that long enough. But what I will say, if you own a weapon and you don't have training, I would recommend that you, one, at least do the research on your state's law, and two, get some type of training. Because at the end of the day, regardless of what you do, you're going to still have to be able to justify it in a court of law, right? And ignorance is not going to be enough. So a lawyer can pick you apart and be like, kind of like, hey, you didn't warn the person, you didn't care, you just bloodthirsty, hungry. In some states, that may get you locked up. Now, places like Texas, I mean, you come to somebody's house in Texas, if you on their land, you can probably get away with it in Texas, but you may not get away with it in whatever state you live in. But the point that I'm making is, it's dangerous for you to own a weapon and not have any training. Whether it's from the military, whether it's from your local gun shop, whether it's, because something as simple, like I have a license to carry in Georgia, but there's some states that don't recognize that. Texas is actually one of the states that do. But if I'm traveling through certain places, then I could be breaking the law in a certain state because so all I'm saying is at least educate yourself, know what your law says on if somebody's coming in your house, because at the end of the day, after you do it, you're gonna have to live with it through your conscience, and you're gonna have to answer. You're gonna have to answer to it in a court of law. So that's just my final advice on that. So I'm not gonna play this last one. We're going long. I'll play one more video, which I think this guy came with a little bit more softer response, but I like it because he talks about does the Bible teach pacifism, which some people believe that it does. So let's go to that.
Todd, question today is this: does Jesus teach pacifism in Matthew 5:38 through 42?
Yeah. Does he want us to be a punching bag? Because it kind of sounds like it. Let's read it because our friends are curious why we'd even suggest it. So why don't you read Matthew 5:38 through 42?
There we go. You've heard that it was said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on the right cheek, turn the other to him also.
Wow, there you go. We have to understand that what Jesus is doing here is this is in the middle of what is famously called the Sermon on the Mount. And so it's why we say, kind of tongue-in-cheek, never memorize a Bible verse. You want to really understand the context of a passage. If all we had was that verse in the Scripture where when you're punched, give them the other cheek. If somebody takes your coat,
Yeah, he goes on to give some more examples.
Yeah, he does. And it sure sounds like it. But what Jesus is doing there is he's correcting the understanding of what people thought righteousness was. And so the law is given, Adam, for people who are bent towards evil. The law restrains evil and protects folks who live alongside evil people, right? But the righteous don't need a law, okay? Love doesn't need a law. There's no limit on love or grace or kindness. We don't put laws to restrain that. We restrain evil in men. And so Jesus is walking them through in Matthew chapter 5 specifically this crazy idea, which is unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and the Pharisees, the most religious people on earth, the most God law-abiding people on earth, then he said you're not going to get into heaven. And people are like, what? Mind blown. That doesn't seem right. And so what he walks them through is really the Ten Commandments. If you'll watch and look closely at Matthew chapter 5, he just says, you've heard it said you shouldn't murder. He starts really with our commandments that affect how we treat one another. You've heard it said you shouldn't commit murder. And so they said, hey, if we don't murder somebody, we're good with God. He says, no. I'm saying if you even say to your brother, you fool, right? Or harbor hate in your heart towards your brother, you've had a murderous intent. And God says, that's not righteous. You've heard it said you shouldn't commit adultery. But I say to you, if you look at one with lust in your heart, that you've committed adultery. And all of a sudden people are like, uh-oh, right? And so he goes on to say you should remove anything that would cause your heart to lustfully long to control or have another person. And then he goes on, he talks about a wrong view of even human relationships and marriage. And then he comes out of that and says a wrong view of human oaths, right? The scripture says you should not bear false witness. And so the Pharisees played games about whether or not they should swear by the temple or by the holy city of God. And Jesus says, you should let your yes be yes and your no be no. And then finally, he gets to this whole thing about not coveting, which is Jesus is going to say, not only should you not need what other people have, you shouldn't even hold on that tightly to what you have. And so there's some teaching there. What Jesus is doing is expanding what the heart of God intends for people, what a kingdom people should love and live like. All right? Now, what he's doing here is he's giving commands to followers of Christ or followers of God who are citizens of the kingdom because they have a right relationship with God. First of all, we see that none of us can live up to that standard. So we're going to need a Savior, which Jesus makes the claim eventually that he is. But what's he doing and what's he saying right here? Well, I already told you, what he's doing is correcting their understanding of the law. In most cases, it was you thought this is all you had to do was not murder, okay? And what he's doing in this particular instance is people thought, okay, justice in the Old Testament was eye for eye or tooth for a tooth. And what he's saying is, you know what? I don't want retaliation to be your first response. I want your first response to be, hey, it's hurt people that hurt people. How can I be a peacemaker? That's exactly what he got through saying a little bit earlier in Matthew, right? Blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be the sons of God. And it's not like, hey, you knocked out my tooth, I'm going to knock out yours, right? Because even that law was there to limit evil, because there were folks like, if you knock out my tooth, I'm going to take out your eye. And so God limited human aggression and spite by saying, no, tooth for tooth, eye for eye. But now he's coming back even more. And he's going to say, I don't want you to be pacifist and be abused, but I want you to not run right to your rights under the law. To go, if you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you equally as much. He's saying the heart of God is to be kind. This is what he says in Luke 6 when he's basically repeating these ideas. He says, I want you to be like your Father in heaven, who himself was kind to evil and ungrateful men. And he's going to model this himself. And so you're going to watch what Jesus does. And what he calls us to do is to be kingdom people. Now, by the way, pacifism is the idea that anybody who takes the name of God should never act aggressively towards somebody else. You should turn your left cheek when your right cheek is hit. But you need to know that citizens of heaven also live on earth. and we'll be the best citizens of the nations that we live in. And God has given governments the right, okay, to execute judgment. And so sometimes, as citizens, not who are vigilantes, responding out of my personal right to hit you back when you hit me,
Right.
governments have a right, though, to bring judgment. And sometimes citizens who work underneath the umbrella of God's authority with a government can go to war, all right, or can execute justice. It says in 1 Peter 2:14 that governments have the right to punish evildoers. And what are government except human rulers?
Right.
Okay? And so we should pray for kings and those that are in authority, that they would be godly human rulers, and they would sometimes execute justice. What he's talking about here, Adam, is what kind of neighbor am I? If you do me wrong, right? You break one of my windows, I don't get to go, well, the law says I get to break one of yours.
Right.
What he says is, man, you ought to go and do everything you can to say, hey, Adam, help me understand why there's a rock through this window, right? And I want to do the best I can to make peace with you. And you might show yourself to be a fool where I'm going to have to widen the circle and bring in other people and maybe let you experience consequence. But if I got a chance to be gracious, I'm going to be gracious to you, okay? Jesus does stuff that we're not called to do. You've heard me talk about why I don't wear a WWJD bracelet, right? So what would Jesus do? Well, Jesus did always turn the other cheek. When Jesus was nailed to a cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for I know not what they do. But the Bible doesn't teach that we should all let people be abusive towards us. That would be a misreading of the text. It's really just saying this. Paul, when he's talking about what love is not provoked. Love doesn't take into account the wrong suffered. Love doesn't seek its own. And that's what Jesus is saying. I want you to be marked by love. So your own right is to take a tooth when a tooth is taken, all right? When somebody provokes you by hitting you, hit him back. He's saying no, right? What you want to do as best as you're able, be at peace with all men. And so your first step should not be retaliation. That'll be reconciliation and peacemaking. The reason most people hurt you is because they're hurting. And you ought to be God's source of grace in their life. So don't confuse what God calls you to do as an individual citizen of the kingdom of heaven, who as much as is possible for you, be at peace with all men, as it says in Romans 12, with what God calls us to do when a minister of God, the government, who has not been given the sword for nothing, goes and moves against evil men or evil nations or evil actions. Christians can and should participate as ministers of God to punish evildoers. Just make sure that your first response individually is not vigilantism and I'm going to get my rights. Your first right is to be a picture of the grace and kindness of God. And that's what Jesus is calling us to. And it's a radical ethic. Yeah. It's a brand new kingdom ethic that he's teaching us in the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah, it's a radical love that is seen by few.
Yep. Exactly. And he wants the world to see it in us. And that's what Jesus is doing. He's bringing the revelation of who God is. And he says, Adam, you and Todd, you're going to be his ambassadors to the world. So be a peacemaker, not a pacifist. Okay? And don't be a punching bag. And don't look to punch back as your first response.
I love it. But
protect yourself. Get out of abusive situations. It's not loving to let somebody continue in sin towards you. But the first thing you want to do is do all you can to not strike back as your first response.
Okay, so he said a lot there. I think you can see the heart of God in his response. I think he broke it down pretty well to say that we're just not called to be pacifists and just take whatever people gives us. But at the same time, kind of going along what Anthony and Joe was saying, it's also a heart posture, and our heart should be to love our enemies, reconcile our enemies, if possible, you know. And so ultimately, I think that's where I land the plane at, is that God established government authorities. It's okay for you to serve in those authorities. You're going to be judged by your heart. You should have a heart of a heart like Jesus. You know, love your enemies, love your neighbors, love God, pray for them. Understand that we're not fighting against flesh. We're fighting against spirits and principalities. So when somebody is doing that, they're being used by the enemy. But at the end of the day, to just blatantly say to kill somebody in a line of duty or whatever is sinful, I think, like Anthony said, it's gonna make it real hard for you to read your Bible. So those are my final thoughts. What y'all have?
Yeah, I'll say that I agree with what you're saying, and I would only add to that, looking at other people and trying to figure out what their intention is, what's in their heart, is futile. You know, I can't judge another person's heart. All I can do is what we just did. Have this conversation, put out there the correct principles, and let people do what they're going to do. I go back to the conversation with Keith. You know, I wouldn't know what's in his heart. You know, I wouldn't know what he would do in that situation. And so it's easy to misunderstand or mistake somebody's position, because I don't know their heart, and I don't pretend to do that. And so when I'm looking at someone serving in the military, someone having to take a life, I think I would have to slow down and make sure I understood, and ultimately that's between them and God, because a lot of times what a person's doing uh, doesn't doesn't even come on my radar. There's so many people that have had to do things in active duty that I don't know anything about. I don't know why they did it. I don't know what prompted them to do it. But for me as an individual to judge all people in a uniform, I just think that's where I have to draw the line for myself and say, no, I can't just do that. If something's wrong, it's wrong. And I think you come to the table and you say this is wrong. Why that person did it the way that they did it, that's something they're going to have to deal with as they stand before God. Just as I have to deal with the decisions that I make in my life as I stand before God. And so at the end of the day, somebody asked me, hey, do you believe that a Christian can serve in the military? My answer is yes. There is a lot of moving parts to that, beyond that answer, but the fundamental answer is yeah.
Yeah. um, yeah, it's a very pregnant yes. There's a lot of subtext that comes along with that yes. I think, like I said before, me sitting here and trying to figure out what your motives are you a Christian, all of those kinds of questions are ultimately punching up, and that's not a pastor thing, that's a Christian thing, that's a human thing, that's not a me, that's not for me to decide or to figure out, because the person sitting across from me is still an image bearer. And it's still my job to love them and all of that kind of stuff. That dude took us on a very wild ride with the 5 minutes or whatever that it was that clip was. Landed in a spot where I could agree with him, but like, man, he said a lot in a very short period of time. But I do think at the end of the day, there's a very big difference between um, an unbiblical stance of any and all version of defense or aggression or whatever, is like any and all bad, non-biblical, anti-God, the whole nine yards. It's gonna make it really hard to actually consume your Bible authentically. That doesn't require like some serious gymnastics to get there. So you know it's not, anytime that we try and speak for another person and try and dictate where they're at and all of that kind of stuff, we are automatically holding back from them, we are automatically separating ourselves from that person, and not giving them the opportunity to be able to articulate their heart or even have an opinion personally, like with them and God. We've already figured out what, or think we figured out what that is. And so when I would counsel anybody that if they feel passionately enough about this to have an opinion, because like Dan said, there's a lot of this stuff that, like, yeah, I've got an opinion about this country, I've got an opinion about the system, but as far as sitting here trying to figure out, oh, is a soldier a Christian, is a military person a Christian, um that's not part of my regular like diet, that's not part of my regular life. So if it is yours and you really feel the need to sit here and articulate a fully formed opinion on whether or not a Christian can be a part of the military and all of that kind of stuff, then I would seriously just counsel you to take the time to consider the individual in the conversation, rather than developing a straw man and attacking the straw man. Whatever that straw man may be, you can put whatever you want into that straw man, but then you're losing sight of the individual that's involved. Just likewise, that if you're the person that says, I'm going to jump to my right as XYZ, then you have developed your own straw man and are attacking that and using that as justification rather than considering the individual at play and all of that. So yeah, like Ann said, to echo that and echo what Rico said, yes, I think that's a layup to say that yes, those worlds can meet. A Christian can be in the military without being a hypocrite or some kind of something like that, and that's why I default back to all of those deeper nuancy points when I say things like, do the heart work, do the leg work, to do that work between you and God. That's not me taking a shot. That's not a veiled jab. I really mean that. And that's between you and God. That's not for me to comment on.
Yeah, no, all good points all the way around. Great conversation, and I appreciate everybody who's still rocking with it because we went for a hot minute. But hey, if you enjoy these kind of conversations, just make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to our channels. Joe, you want to let them know what your channel so they can catch your Saturday shows?
Yeah, so you can find Ant and I every Friday morning live with another guy, Andrew, who from the Ministry Misfits for Kingdom on the Road. You can also find us live every Saturday morning with Pastor TC for Let It Rip. Raw, authentic conversation that goes here, there, and everywhere. Whereas with Kingdom on the Road right now, we're working through the Old Testament, working to hopefully demystify the Old Testament for folks and give people some tools on how to approach it. You also find weekly, I put out Buddy Walk with Jesus. Right now, we're in the midst of studying through the book of Esther and getting ready to jump into Acts in the new year.
Sweet. And then Anthony's Love Thy Neighbor podcast. How do we find it on YouTube? Because if you put that in, it's kind of hard to get to YouTube.
You got to find it under my name, just under Anthony Wilson. And usually I pop up. Probably my shorts pop up before anything else because my shorts, I post those every single day. So when you type in my name, it's probably going to be on one of my YouTube shorts that pops up first, and then you can just go and click on that. Or if you're going on YouTube, you can look on YouTube and just put Anthony Wilson 2273 on YouTube, and I'll pop up. Or look me up on Facebook, and all my stuff is on Facebook too. So if you find my Facebook page, you'll find my YouTube, you'll find Instagram, you'll find everything on there because I post to all my sites. I rarely post to Twitter. It's every now and then, but
Yeah, so no, but just definitely, if you enjoy this kind of conversation, make sure you subscribe to each and one of our channels. Mine's Blessedtimony, BLESSEDTIMONY. You put that in, and it's the only one, so you should be able to find it. But I know me and Ant was talking about in January starting a new YouTube channel called Reddit Reviews and Reddit Replies, where we're just gonna go on Reddit, look at some of the questions they ask, and just be replying to them. And so definitely make sure y'all look out for that. We'll plug it on here when we get to that. But I'm back. I'm in the new place. Sorry it's been so long since we dropped one, but we're going to be a little bit more consistent. Other than that, I appreciate y'all rocking with us. If you hadn't done it yet, when we pop out, just hit the like button on whatever platform you're watching on. Until next time, peace. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.